and welcome to everybody on Cloud Fitness. So in today's video, we are going to see what exactly is object-oriented programming in Python. So we are going to see what is OOPS and why do we use OOPS and what is the use case for having the object-oriented programming and what does it exactly mean, right? So let's go ahead and see what is object-oriented programming in Python. Now, before I move on to what exactly is OOPS, we would also like to understand what is the procedural programming. So whenever I say that, till now whatever we have been doing, right, what was that? That is a procedural or that is a functional programming, right? So whenever you have a set of steps to do and those set of steps we were writing it, let's say in the for loop, or maybe we were creating a function, we were calling a function inside another function. So that is nothing but that is a procedural or functional programming. So this is the first thing that should be very clear to all of you, that this is nothing but this is a procedural or functional programming. Now similarly, you already know that we have been talking about functions, right? So let's say if I want to have the details of employees, for example, right? So if you see, I have, let's say, 100 employees, or at this moment, let's say we have 3 employees. I have Abhishek, I have Lee, I have Maggie. So I have 3 employees. Now for each of the employee, if I want to maintain the details of each of these employees, what we can do is we can create the functions, right? I can create, def Abhishek, right? Now Abhishek is an employee. I have created his function. I have his name, which takes the function takes his name as the input parameter, his ID number, salary, post, right? And it gives me all these details as the output. Now similarly I do it for the Lee, similarly I do it for the Maggie. Now this is nothing but this is a procedural programming, right? So I have all of these functions over here. Now whenever I want to do anything with the data of the Maggie, what I can do is I can simply call this function Maggie. I can pass in the input parameter, the name, ID number, the salary, the post. So basically I have my details. Now if I run it, you will say the name of the employee is Maggie, the ID number of the employee is 123, the salary of the employee is $300, the post of the employee is HR. Right, now this is what the procedural programming is. Now is there any problem with it? No, there is absolutely no problem with it, right? Then but the only thing that you have to notice here is, now if we have, let's say 1 lakh employees in an organization, in that case it will be very cumbersome to write multiple functions or to even capture any other details for that matter in the steps, right? So because now that particular way of writing a code is very cumbersome in nature, right? Due to this, the concept of OOPS came into picture. Now OOPS is nothing but OOPS is an object. Now it treats everything as a real world entity. Now when you are saying Abhishek, Lee and Maggie, right, in terms of a program, right, Abhishek, Lee and Maggie are just functions. But when you talk about OOPS, Abhishek, Lee and Maggie, they are nothing but they are employee objects. They become objects. So that is why it is called as object oriented programming. Now this OOPS is nothing but it is a better way of programming. Can you do a code without OOPS? Yes, you can do it. But once you have, let's say you have to write a game, right? In that case, if you have to create a game, if you have to code any heavy lines, now in that case, and if there is a lot of repetitiveness, in that case OOPS will be very helpful because it will reduce the number of lines of the code. It will increase the reusability of your code, right? Because if you see in these functions, I'm doing the same thing. I'm calling the same print statements, but it is a copy and paste in all the functions. So this code is not a reusable code, right? All the functions have few statements which are repeating in themselves. Now, and all of these Abhishek, Lee and Maggie, these are all employees. Right now, when you talk about OOPS gives a better way of writing this whole code. Now, when you talk about OOPS, so this is how the OOPS will work, for the same piece of code. I just want to give you a comparison first, even before going on to the theory part. So if you see, what it says is that, we understand that you have Abhishek, Maggie and Lee. Now all 3 of them are employees. These are objects for us. So let's keep the attributes of those objects, the attributes of these objects into a class. Create a class of employees. So they say, basically the oops, not me or they. So oops is saying that, okay, let's have a class called as employee, right? Now in this employee class, so whenever you will call this class, right, this is a class, Maggie, Abhishek and Lee are the objects of this class, right? Employee is a class and Abhishek, Maggie and Lee are the objects of this class, and name, ID number, salary and the post, these are the attributes of those particular objects, right? Now what it does, it says instead of writing multiple function, what you can do is you can create a function inside this class of employee, right? The moment you write this class employee, you mean that all the objects inside the employee class will be employees, right? They are all employees. We are treating all of them as real world objects, real world entities. These are nothing but the employees. Now employees have their own attributes. They have the name, the ID number, the salary, the post. These are nothing but these are the attributes, right? Now you define a function over here. Now don't worry about the syntax at this point. We are going to discuss syntax later on, but try to understand the concept. Now it has a function over here which is doing something, but it is not replicating, right? For Maggie, for Abhishek, everything is there. It is nicely binded together in the employee class. So now what the highlighted part, if you see, it is nicely binded in the employee class, so you don't have to repeat the code for 1,000 employees or for the 1 lakh employees. Now employee is a class. Now object, Maggie is an object, Abhishek is an object. So whenever you want to put any details for the Maggie, you want to put any details for Abhishek, what you can do is Abhishek and Maggie are the objects. So let's say employee A is equals to employee, and inside this employee class pass in these values, right? Maggie 1 to 3 is her ID number, $300 is her salary, another attribute, HR is the post. Now similarly something goes for Abhishek. Now these Maggie and Abhishek becomes the object of this employee class, right? They become object of this employee class, right? And if you want to get any, if you want to do anything on these objects, if you want to perform any action on these objects, you can do that. How you can perform an action? You can call any function. You can call a function on these objects. A dot information, B dot information. Where is information? Information is here. Information is a function. Now this information will run for Maggie, Abhishek, Lee, or even the 100 employees. It will run for all the employees. It will say that Maggie is the HR and his or her salary is $300. That is what it will say. Now when it goes to Abhishek, it is going to pick up the same print statement, right? So this is how the oops work. So now let me try to run this. Now you can see how does it work, right? Instead of writing everything in this manner, right, we can switch to this particular way of writing code, right? And it has a lot of concept associated to it, your encapsulation, your polymorphism, which we are going to discuss. No worries, even the syntax we are going to discuss nicely in the upcoming videos, but this is just an introductory video. Okay, now this reduces the lines of the code, right? And it is now in the first go, when you're looking at it, you might feel, okay, it is not that easy, or you might not feel that comfortable. But the moment you start understanding it, this way of writing code will be much easier. It will be much better, and you will understand it. Even you'll be more comfortable with this way of writing code, and it will add a lot of flexibility to your code. It will add a lot of flexibility. Okay, so this is nothing but this is what your oops is all about, right? Now similarly, when you talk about your functional programming and your object-oriented programming, these are the subtle differences. So let's say you want to add any new data points, right, in your functional code, right? You basically have to add another function, and the lines of the code is it just keeps on increasing. But in object oriented programming it is so easy, right? Just now you saw that I have an I have a class employee, and I just don't need to rewrite all the things if I have to add 100 of the employees, or even if I have to delete 100 of the employees, right? I don't have to do much of code change, and writing it and understanding it is also very easy. Right now, in the similar way, procedural programming is not based on real world entities. Object oriented programming, they consider everything as a real world entity. So they are considering that, okay, all three of them are the employees, right? So that is how you have to think when you are trying to do the object oriented programming. Now, when you talk about C, your Pascal, now these were the languages, which were pretty common maybe 10-15 years back. At least people, they used to learn these languages 10-15 years back. But right now, you have this Python, you have your Ruby, Perl, where people actually learn these concepts of object oriented programming, right? Now similarly, procedural programming does not mean that procedural programming is bad. So whenever you have a piece of code which is smaller, and with a low to the medium complexity, you can actually go with the procedural programming. There is no problem with that. But when your design is complex, and the complexity is medium to high, and you have a lot of designing coming in, then in that case you have to go for object oriented programming, because it makes your tasks very easy, right? So this was a little bit intro on the procedural and the object oriented programming. As I proceed, I will also explain the main concepts of OOPS, like classes, the objects, the syntax part of it, the polymorphism, encapsulation, inheritance, data abstraction. So these are all a very nice concepts which you can bind together, and you can create a very good working version of the code. So I hope you like this particular video, and do remember to like, share and subscribe to my channel, and stay tuned for the more updates on the Python. So thank you so much for being till here.